Welcome to the Hangar Deck Podcast. We bring amazing aviation talk and interviews for the aviation enthusiast. You are listening to www.thehangardec.com with host Pitch Lock Pete and the Hangar Deck crew. This show is brought to you by Leading Edge Aviation Consultants. Pre-flight is complete and the crew is strapping in. Stand by for Pitch Lock Pete and the Hangar Deck team at the Hangar Deck Podcast. Welcome to this episode of the Hangar Deck Podcast.
Hey, welcome back to the Hangar Deck. I'm your host, Pitchlock Pete, and it's February 16th, 2020. Happy New Year, Hangar Deck listeners. Welcome back to our podcast. I've got my co-host in station, or actually on the horn there. What's going on there, Fast Eddie?
Fast Eddie.
Yeah, we got
In-house.
in his house.
Yeah, my house.
So, hey, I know it's been a while. It's been since October since we've been back in the studio again. We dusted off all the equipment. If you're a first-time listener to the podcast, you can find us on Stitcher Radio, Google Play. Okay, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, and of course, if you're not a big podcaster on your smartphone, go to the the interweb there, www.thehangardec.com for all your favorite episodes of the Hangar Deck podcast. So, Eddie, before we get into this interview, I got to tell our fans, we've got a half-page ad in the Aviator Hotline magazine, and it's a trader magazine, and I love looking at it, and dreaming big. We got airplanes, all kinds of different airplanes. They've got properties for sale, with the hangars, and there's a few of our friends down in the Atlanta area that come to mind because he puts up a lot of his. He's constructing a new hangar down there, Steve Seal. You knew I was going to drop his name in there, but it's in FBOs. It's sitting around in FBOs, and this gentleman that we've got on the show had picked the magazine up, didn't really know who the Hangar Deck was, and saw our ad and said, "Well, let me give these guys a call and see what's going on." So he is an author. He's an archaeologist. He's an aviation historian that I've never met another aviation historian that has dedicated his life work to bringing back airplanes from vintage warbird airplanes. He's written the book "The Great Navy Birds of Lake Michigan." Sorry about that, Lake Michigan. I want to welcome to the show Mr. Taras Lyssenko. How you doing, Taras?
I'm good, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, Taras, on behalf of Ed and myself and everybody out there in the Hangar Deck land, thanks for joining us. Unbelievable stuff that you've done. You've really, I'm just going to turn it over and say, can you tell our audience just a little bit about yourself in like a couple of minutes before we get into the nitty-gritty of warbirds in Lake Michigan?
A little about me.
That's an open-ended question, isn't it?
Well, I guess I'll tell you my history, or a history of A&T recovery with the group that recovers the aircraft from Lake Michigan and other places. We're both military veterans, Army veterans, myself and Allan Olson. I attended University of Illinois at Chicago for math and computer science. I joined a wonderful military. Was branched, went to Officer Candidate School at Fort Benning, Georgia. Was branched infantry, came infantry ranger type. Al was he was in Germany for a while. I think because he did maintenance, I think, of Pershing missiles, so he doesn't talk about it too much. And then again, I don't talk about my military stuff too much. Did that for a few years, and Al and I Al and I liked when we were young. We were just kind of young boys who liked to. We're just young boys. I can prove I'm still 17. I can act that way. We're just young boys that like to explore and find things. And we were out in Lake Michigan with a boat that Al got that we held together with duct tape. We upgraded that. Al found a sunken boat in a harbor in Florida, and we fixed that. And then
wow.
So we should have died. I used my 9 lives many times over, and we like to hunt for shipwrecks at first, but then we found out about the aircraft, and then we're just good at finding things. So we started finding the aircraft and recovering them for museums. At first, we recovered a Wildcat fighter for the Cradle of Aviation Museum in Long Island, New York, and then the Patriots Point, the USS Yorktown Aircraft Carrier Association approached us and said, "Get us a Wildcat fighter and an SPD Dauntless." And then the director of the National Naval Aviation Museum, the new director at the time in 1988 or whatever year it was, approached us and told us he was going to put us in prison if we kept doing that. And so, of course, we gave him the middle finger salute, but he said, "Well, I have a deal for you. You'll basically work for us," and then launched what ended up being about 40 aircraft recovered.
Wow.
So
your story, to the warbird community, your story is not new. Everybody knows that, everybody knows A&T, recovery is a big outfit. You guys have been doing this for a long time.
Well, we're actually a tiny outfit. There's only like 10 of us.
Well, that to us, that's a big outfit. We're a small outfit. We're 2.
So. Yeah. But that size of the outfit belies your significance in a community of geeks like us in the warbird community. But so Pete and I, in that community, is very familiar with the Lake Navy, especially during the war years. Pete and I, being Navy veterans, we're extremely familiar with Great Lakes and the old Glenview Naval Air Station. But a lot of our listeners may not be familiar with why are there so many darn Navy warbirds in Lake Michigan. So, Taras, can you talk real quickly about how that came to be? With
yes,
the war and training and flat tops on Lake Michigan.
Well, when the U.S. entered the war after December 7th, 1941, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, there had been an effort in the U.S. to stay out of that European and Asian war, right? So let's call it our military-industrial complex wasn't all that well developed, and you had wolf packs off the East Coast, and you had Japanese submarines off the West Coast, and we had to gear up. We had to train an awful lot of aviators, pilots, deck crews, things such as that. And so the idea of trying to train those crews and those pilots off the coast where U-boats and submarines would make happy sport of a training aircraft carrier, right? That was not too appealing of an idea. So they came up, people in the Navy, and there's been different people that they say came up with the idea. They say Captain Manley, I think he was Lieutenant Commander Manley, came up with the idea. Admiral Whitehead, they say, came up with the idea. And I don't really know, maybe it was a conversation. But so they came up with an idea to buy some excursion vessels, which they were cruise ships, like we take a cruise in the Caribbean or the Mediterranean these days. They actually had these really nice ships, steamships, side paddle wheels, steamships on the Great Lakes that you could take a cruise for a week prior to the war. So the Navy bought these 2 vessels. One, the Greater Buffalo was one, and the C&D was another. And they converted them into the USS Wolverine and the USS Sable. And from October 1942 to the autumn of 1945, they qualified about 15,000 pilots for aircraft carrier duty, along with a lot of deck crews, and they trained radar crews, all kinds of different crews on these 2 ships. And the ships, I'm a pilot, but I've never landed on an aircraft carrier. I tried it on a simulator at Oceana once, and I thought it was kind of fun hitting the fantail, but in the simulator. But my understanding is these ships were smaller than the fleet carriers and even the escort carriers, and it was kind of difficult. So about 130 of the aircraft ended up in the lake. They had a recovery operation where they recovered a number of them, shallow water ones, but that left 120 or so in the lake from the war until they started being located again in the late 70s.
Wow. And I'm just amazed. I mean, I have your book here, The Great Navy Birds of Lake Michigan, and you know the photographs and the research behind all of this, and plus coupled with your personal experience of actually recovering these airplanes is incredible. You know, because you just talked about the paddle wheel ships and you've done the work. I mean, the pictures are all in this book, and they're great. How long did it take you to write this masterpiece here?
35 years.
Wow.
Well, it because it actually wrote itself, right? It's all I am is a documenter of what occurred. And it's one thing I do, and I save every email, I save everything. I save every article, I save thousands of photographs. I just save all that stuff. And the book, well, you've read it, the book wrote itself in reality. All I'm doing is making sure other people can see the story. And that's all I've done. I'm just the recorder of what occurred, right?
Right.
If that makes sense. Yeah. And they
well,
it's a pretty wild story.
Yeah, there's a lot of wild stories in here, and you know, Ed and I were talking before the episode, like we could probably ask you questions and talk for hours on end on some of these specifics of these experiences that you've had.
You know what the biggest complaint I get about the book is?
No.
What's that?
There's people that have witnessed other stories that say, why isn't that story in the book? And I said, well, how large do you want the book to be? Because I had to leave a whole bunch of stories out. I had to leave out about the TBDs, the Devastators, the TBD Dauntless Devastators, TBD Torpedo Bomber Devastators. I had to leave that part out of the story. I had to leave a whole lot of wild stories out that I had to pick ones that
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And what I tell people when they complain is, could you write a book?
That's right.
Yeah, it's funny because as Pete was remarking, each recovery is its own story and can be its own book, but prominent and central to all of the recovery stories is your start, and the National Naval Aviation Museum is involved in quite a bit of your story and how you got started. Can you talk about that, like roughly 86 time frame? When Captain Rasmussen became the director, what changed in the recovery, and can you talk about that whole ownership? The Navy technically owns these, and you being salvage and recovery, the like item for like item deals, and the U.S. code involved in you guys getting your start. Can you discuss that?
Oh yes. Okay. So I think I mentioned that Captain Rasmussen got hold of us and said if we kept doing that, he would put us in prison. But he had an offer for us that we would work for him. And we said, okay, well, all right, fine, we'll do that. And then he said, well, I don't have any money. And so, you know, our joke was, did you suck on a lemon before you called us so that you didn't start laughing? And we, you know, we were pretty cocky. We're always been pretty cocky. And so we're like, you're nuts, right? He said, well, no, I have this law, Title 10, United States Code, Section 2572. And we said, wow, cool, great, wonderful. What the hell is that, right? And he said, well, it allows me to make an exchange, barter, so that I can enhance my historic collection. It's a law that Congress gave Department of Defense to enhance. And so he said, okay, so you guys will recover the aircraft for me, and I'll give you old junk that you can sell, right? And so we said, like what? And he said, well, I'll give you a couple of the aircraft on the bottom of the lake. I said, okay, that's cool. We could sell those. We know that. There's collectors that would buy those. And he said, I'll give you some other stuff. I'll give you a HU-16. Ever see an HU-16? It's got like a wingspan of 105 feet. We're like, oh, okay, cool. That'll be fun. What we'll do with it, who knows, right? Anyway, so then we find out, he calls us back and says, we have a problem. The way the law is written is that it's for like items for like items. And we said, well, okay, we're going to give you aircraft, and you're going to give us aircraft, right? And he said, well, the problem is the aircraft you're going to give me, you're not really giving me those aircraft because those are the Navy's aircraft. So people understand this is, I use an example of a wallet in your wallet when you're walking through the parking lot of a grocery store. If you drop your wallet out of your pocket, go into the grocery store, and someone else comes along and finds your wallet, it's not their wallet, it's your wallet. The money in it is your money. But in our society, when that happens, we compensate the person who finds it and returns it to us. So it's no different with something underwater. It's still owned by the people of the United States of America. But Captain Rasmussen was very forward thinking, and he realized that the private warbird world had an interest in these aircraft and wanted these aircraft. So anyway, so it was like item for like item, so he couldn't do it. So what he was still telling us was still illegal. So there was a representative, and my brain's dead at the moment, and I'll think of it as soon as we're done with this podcast. I'll think of his name. I can read it in the book.
I know his name because he was the congressman when I was in flight school down there. It was Earl Hutto, correct?
Okay, there you go. Yes, Earl Hutto. Yeah.
Nice one, Ed. Nice one.
There you go. See, good thing. It's a good thing we have everything documented, right? And you remember
exactly.
that, right?
It's in the book.
Anyway, yeah, it's in the book. So Earl Hutto, it was figured out what the language had to be to change it so that it could be, services could be exchanged for items. So Earl Hutto, it was about 6 words as I recall, right? So Earl Hutto sponsored the bill, and Al and I became instant lobbyists, which was kind of fun. We knew nothing about how you get Congress to do something, but it didn't take long. We sent a bunch of letters, and it didn't take long, and Earl Hutto sent dear constituent letters, and it was my understanding it was about 300 co-signers pretty quick on the bill. And then so then of course, people try to tack stuff on, and
right.
All that wonderful
Washington,
yeah, all that congressional jockeying for, they want a new band shell built in their town kind of thing, so tack onto the bill, right?
Right.
Anyway, so it took about 2 years, which in those days, because we were young, and 2 years seemed like an eternity, right? We were stuck doing basically without any ability to make money doing this stuff for 2 years. So anyway, finally it went through, and we recovered right away. We recovered an SPD Dauntless and a rigid wing Wildcat fighter for Captain Rasmussen right away, as soon as it went through. And we got a number of submerged aircraft that, of the 3 submerged aircraft we were given, all 3 were made to fly. Were turned over to private citizens, and all 3 were made to fly. And the 2 Wildcats were brought to Oshkosh a few years later, and then SPD, I don't know if they've ever brought it to Oshkosh, but I don't know where it is right now, but there's and then over the years, I don't know the exact count because Captain Rasmussen didn't tell me, but he exchanged other ones that we had recovered for him to private citizens. I know one's in England being restored to flight, and so it's about 7 or 8 have been turned over to private citizens for restoration to flight. So Captain Rasmussen and Buddy Macon found a way to bring about a happy median to get a lot of these aircraft into private hands, as well as the dozens of museums that we've gotten them into. So,
wow.
Fascinating. So the you guys were kind of in limbo there for a couple of years, waiting for how are you going to fund your endeavors. Also central to all the recoveries is how the heck do you find the airplanes? So first of all, I'm fascinated that no one had done it before. So you guys meet this need. How did you go about locating the aircraft that you've recovered to date?
Well, wait, haven't you heard that the Naval History and Heritage Command is leading the effort to identify and preserve these historic aircraft in Lake Michigan? They just released that a few days ago.
Yeah.
They are leading the effort.
Yeah. All right. But before we go any further, guys, I want our audience to know that, and if you're a big fan of the Hangar Deck podcast, we've been going for 5 years. When we first started, Ed, we gave our bios and everything, and Ed's got some time, right, Ed, at the Naval Heritage and History Command?
I do have some time at the end of my Navy Reserve career, yes. And Taras has quite a few stories.
So putting these two guys together was ultimately my evil plan. I wanted to hear somebody that was at the command and somebody that had experience dealing with these guys from an archaeologist point of view.
Yeah, so
this is where Taras, you get to unleash on Ed.
Oh, I'm sure he gets the Saint Award if he dealt with those nitwits and credit jumpers and deniers of history, and they are the scum of the American government. Absolute scum of the American government. I don't think there's any other way to express what works in the upper management of Naval History and Heritage Command, particularly their underwater archaeological branch. And they are the worst bureaucrats, and they're an embarrassment to the United States Navy, to the Department of Defense, and to the people of the United States of America. And I don't think Ed will disagree with me.
No, I can't. But I also have a big disclaimer. I can't get anyone in trouble or myself in trouble. But everything you say is absolutely correct about our bureaucracy. Across the board. Despite that, the Navy is generally okay at keeping records. Sometimes you just got to look for it, and it is going back to the original question. It's a phenomenal story. You guys did on your own. Despite all the roadblocks, you were able to piece together, the pictures, accurate pictures, for you to target, with your sonar and how you go out and look for a ship or for an aircraft. So could you?
Yeah.
Like you guys started. How did you start? Like how did you?
Yeah. So let me make sure people. I'm sorry. Let me make sure people understand one thing. The archivists and the people that maintain the records and stuff at the Naval History and Heritage Command are dedicated people. They are a joy to work with. I'm talking about the underwater archaeological branch and the upper management. Anyway, so how we do this is we use what's called a side scan sonar, right? And everybody's familiar with, but they don't realize that they're familiar with what we call sound imaging. And people don't realize they're familiar with sound imaging. It's a big part of our lives. Ultrasound, right?
Right.
Everybody's had somebody in their family that had children, and in the modern world, every woman who's pregnant goes and gets multiple ultrasounds. The same principle technology is used, and what it is, well, it's a fish finder turned horizontally in a sense. And so what it does is it draws an image of the lake or sea floor, and whatever's on the bottom returns a signal, and and we get a drawing of that. I think I have in the book, I think I have a couple sonar images. Yeah, I do. I have a number of sonar images of aircraft, of the UC-97 U-boat. The UC-97 U-boat, those people at Underwater Archaeological Branch would just love to, if they could find that. Anyway, but it's a great start. They denied that we found it forever, right? Anyway, until we took the director out there and showed it to him. Anyway, he admitted that they were lying to him, telling him that we'd never found it. Anyway, so so we draw a map of the bottom, and we can see everything on the bottom. Now, the reason we were able to find aircraft and other people weren't able to find aircraft is simply, you remember what George Burns used to say, 90% of life is simply being there?
Right.
Mm-hmm. You got to go out and look. and it was amazing. Naval History and Heritage Command was sick Naval Criminal Investigative Services on us and FBI on us, claiming that we would move aircraft and take them so other people couldn't find them. And the FBI actually proved this to me once. They interviewed a person who claimed he couldn't find any of the aircraft because we moved it. And, Naval History and Heritage Command people wanted to be put in prison. And that was the evidence because this person said he couldn't find it. Well, the FBI showed me the printout of the person who was claiming that we moved aircraft. He couldn't find any. And it was, you can't visually see this, but he had about 5 feet of printout paper. It takes about 10 seconds to print out a foot. So the guy had maybe a minute of searching on the lake, and he couldn't find an aircraft. But that was evidence for the Underwater Archaeological Branch to sick the FBI on me that I had stolen an airplane.
Now, I got to interject here. This is incredible. All right, so we told you that, Taras, we told you that I'm a P3 flight engineer, retired Navy guy, and Ed flew the P3 Orion. So, if you got to get his book. You got to get Taras's book, because on page 56, he says he's describing this recovery, the UC-97 and the FBI. And then I'm going to read this, Taras, if you don't mind, that it says, let's see, right here. Another person claimed that he had made a request to the U.S. Navy to fly a P-3 Orion submarine hunting aircraft over the lake, and that the Navy had honored that request. The magnetometer aboard the P-3 indicated there was a large chunk of steel in the lake. Therefore, he was the official finder of the UC-97. Please elaborate, sir.
Oh, you want me to elaborate on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you were P2. You guys are P3 Orion guys. You know a magnetometer can be affected by a solar flare, right?
Yep.
You also know that there's steel barges down there and steel ships down there. And one pass of a magnetometer, well, you're gonna get that kind of stuff, right? It takes and you guys can explain it better than I can, but you do a pattern so that you see if you're repeating, right?
Yeah.
If you're repeating that signature.
Well, Ed yeah, exactly. Ed, this is the Mad Boom never worked on a P3, by the way.
Well, they don't work because of solar flares and all kinds of other stuff. Right?
Yeah, pinnacles, all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
When we use a magnetometer, like in the Caribbean, we have a base magnetometer. That's a what do you call that? A control group, right? We have a base magnetometer set up that then our computer matches what the magnetometer on the vessel sees with the magnetometer on the base thing, and we'll get signatures on both, and so that those are eliminated because we know that's a solar flare, or that could have been an F-18 that flew over really close,
Right.
So our boat's 10 miles away, but that F-18 flew over 10 seconds apart, right, and triggered it, or a customs aircraft or something, which is very common out there.
Right.
So Yeah, but so you guys understand it better, actually, the technology in the P-3 Orion better than I do. But one flyover and you got some sort of target, and then that doesn't even tell you really where the aircraft was, or it was just crazy that the person would say what he was saying. But you know, everybody's smarter than I am and better than I am. So what can I tell you?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, for all of your finds, you guys do a lot of homework. You can't just go out and look. I mean, you've got to localize, right? I mean, you've got to come up with a starting datum for where to search. When you guys were starting out, how did you do that?
Well, so we started with the log books, okay, and the ship's log records, and we went through. Allan and I read every single page and identified every single aircraft that was lost in the records, the log records on the ship's logs. And what they had a newfangled device, a newfangled technology for World War II, which was called radar. And so what would happen is the aircraft would crash, and then you guys are both military, so you guys know the explanation, demonstration, practical application, right? So they were training radar people, so when an aircraft would crash, that was a good thing for a practical application. So they would have the students do a practical application, and they would do a radar fix in a distance to things like Michigan City Light, Chicago Harbor Light, Waukegan Harbor, and they would record that in the log pages. So we got all of that, but we actually soon found right away X never marks the spot. So it's an interesting thing. We can't visually see this, but if the ship was stopped and the radar sweep was going around, you would get from, say, 3 radar fixes, you would get a point, right, where the aircraft would be. Well, you never get a point. What you get is a triangle. When you draw the lines out, intersect, you get a triangle. And that triangle could be quite large. Well, and that comes from the radar sweeping around and the boats moving, right? Well, we soon found that a lot of the aircraft were nowhere near the triangle. And the reason for that is and other people didn't seem to ever understand this. The people, the 19-year-olds or whatever age, they were young, 18, 19, 20-year-olds that were being trained on the radar are no different than anybody else. When an aircraft would crash, what do you think they do?
Right. There's a lot going on. This is an emergency type situation.
Nah. They run out on the deck and go, awesome, dude. Cool. You think the pilot's going to live?
Wow.
Yeah, they don't have to worry about it. They're training, right?
Yeah.
So they become gawkers, right? Just like an accident on the highway. Most people become gawkers.
Rubberneckers.
Yeah. Well, what do you think these crews were doing when a plane crashed, right? There was crash boats running to it, going to the aircraft. They would watch. We actually have films.
I gotta still remember this is the 40s, not the 90s or the 2000s when we served. If I got up out of my station and went outside to look, I would be yelled at.
Well, we actually have films. You can see them all gawking on the side of the ship.
Wow.
We actually have historical films from the War Department on board the Wolverine and Sable where there's a crash, and you can see everybody running to the side gawking, right?
Oh, wow.
All right, so all these people who thought they could find it, well, they didn't take any of this into account. Well, Al and I are boys. We know what boys do.
Wow.
So all we had to do was think through, what would we do? Well, we'd be standing on the fantail going, hey, man, that guy looks like he's going to die. Oh, God, that sucks. Oh, it's January out here. Man, is it cold? Better him than me, right?
Yeah.
So the ship's still moving at 15 miles an hour. And then the instructor gets them back in and says, okay, practical application, we got to record where that airplane went in, guys, right? And so by the time they do that, it's 10 minutes, who knows how far they've moved, right? So anyway, what we realized early on is we have to really expand our search areas to be quite large. And we had to do a lot of time.
Right.
An awful lot of time, and we had to have the logistics to handle it. So,
Well,
that's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge search area, and boy, you're really not competing at the time to find these airplanes. I mean, there's no other, how many other archaeologists or historians?
Well, actually, there was a lot of people out there trying to do it.
Wow.
There was quite a few, and then the Navy, Captain Rasmussen and Buddy Macon would always get these complaints. How come you only use A&T recovery? And they would say, well, because we say we want an SBD, and A&T recovery hands us a videotape of an SBD.
Wow.
And they would say, wow, you're a scuba diver. You say you can find the aircraft, and they say, well, pay. A lot of people had a misconception. They would say the Navy paid us, and Captain Rasmussen and Buddy Macon would say, we don't pay them anything. We tell them what we want, and they give us a videotape and show us. And it was very interesting how still to this day, scuba divers who want us to give them shipwreck locations, because there's a lot of ships down there, and when you're looking for aircraft, you find ships, really neat ships, schooners with all their rigging, and really just ships that disappeared 100 and something years ago, just what we call sail away, just disappeared, left port, and never was seen again. These scuba divers always want us to give them positions, and we say, well, we're not doing that, and they say, well, the Navy paid you to find all this stuff, and we say, no, they didn't. And they don't understand the Navy didn't pay us to find all this
right.
stuff. We just did it on our own. It was pretty risky. It was
right. So what depth of water are we looking at here?
Well, we started recovering aircraft in 40 feet of water, and now we're working on aircraft 600 feet deep.
That's amazing.
So, yeah. And
wow.
Scuba divers dive on things 100 feet and shallower, and we have remotely operated vehicles that work on anything deeper, over 100 feet.
Wow.
Which is
incredible.
Fun.
Hey, we're talking to Taras Lyssenko, author, A&T Recovery Team founder, and we'll be right back at the Hangar Deck.
Aviators Hotline has been bringing buyers and sellers together for 39 years. The aviation community has come to rely on them to assist in the buying and selling of single, twin, and turboprop aircraft, as well as parts and services. Published monthly in print and digital format, Aviators Hotline is positioned to be your true marketing solution with multimedia options. Visit aviatorshotline.com or aircraftforsale.com for more information.
Hey, and we're back. Those are our friends over at Aviator Hotline Magazine. We're talking to Taras Lyssenko as the A&T Recovery. He's telling us stories over the last 35 years of recovering airplanes. But you've got an association with Aviator Hotline, don't you, Taras?
Well, they have a young writer there. I mean, young. He's like 22, 23 years old, named Grant Boyd. And he contacted me through LinkedIn. And if your audience gets the book, they'll see LinkedIn is of the social media. LinkedIn to me is very significant, because I actually tell a LinkedIn story on my book, in the book. But through LinkedIn, this young journalist, Grant Boyd, contacted me and said he'd like to do an article for Aviator Hotline magazine, which I hadn't heard of, right? And then so he contacted me, and he interviewed me, and he wrote up an article. And I was looking at their website, and I saw your ad on there, and so I sent you guys an email. And so yeah, the article in Aviators Hotline is coming out, I think, March issue, which will be distributed at Sun and Fun. So I've read it. I think it's a great article. I think Grant Boyd did a great job. So, but but it's will be distributed Sun Fun. So.
Yeah, our friends over at Aviator Hotline Magazine, they're great. We went down to the Atlanta Warbird Weekend a couple of years ago, and for the 75th anniversary of the Tuskegee Airmen, and they sent me down with a whole package of magazines to pass out to the crowd. That was, yeah, they're a great group of guys over there that are getting the word out. If you're interested in an airplane, which I am, but that's not going to happen anytime soon. But so back on topic, Taras, we were talking to you about depth of water, recoveries, a lot of the details. But can we take a few minutes to talk about Chapter 9? The big buzz in the last couple of months is that movie Midway that came out, and you recovered an airplane called Midway Madness, right?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Dauntless -2 Type 2 2106, bureau number 2106, Midway Madness. It is the most historic artifact in all the Navy's collection.
Ed,
and the reason for that,
I got goosebumps. I got goosebumps, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is the most historic artifact in all the Navy's. And the reason for that is someone might say, well, the USS Arizona. Well, the USS Arizona had its one day of fame or infamy, right?
Yeah.
And it's still sitting where it was. But Midway Madness was at Pearl Harbor when Pearl Harbor was attacked, traveled around, and it ended up on Midway Island with the Marine unit, Marine squadron there, being flown by Danny Iverson. And he and the rest of his squadron attacked the Japanese Armada. And now Danny Iverson died in the war, I think as a result of a training accident. I can't remember exactly. But his squadron mate, Doug Rollo, and I became really, really good friends. And Doug Rollo told me, he said it was interesting because they gave him the SBDs, and they hadn't had time to train them how to dive bomb. So Danny Iverson, Doug Rowell, and the other guys flew out in these SBD-2s, attacked the Japanese Armada, glide bombing them, which is not the way to use an SBD, but they didn't know. But they still went out and attacked. Doug Rollo survived. Danny Iverson survived. Danny Iverson was hit. His gunner was hit. They did I think one of the gear was up when they landed, and he went out. They went back out in another aircraft and attacked the Armada again. So they brought the aircraft back off the island. After the battle, they brought it back. They brought it to Glenview Naval Air Station, and a little while later, a year later or so, I don't remember exactly how long, it was lost in Lake Michigan in about 160 feet of water. And that's where we saw the absolute insanity of Naval History and Heritage Command.
Oh, God.
Come on. They had this guy, this archaeologist, this piece of crap archaeologist, who was going to show us how to recover an aircraft. And he was demanding that he be allowed on our boat, and that he was going to go scuba diving at 160 feet deep, and he was going to supervise the recovery and do all this nonsense. He knew nothing of it. He was such a buffoon. It was unbelievable. And that's where we saw the mettle of Captain Rasmussen and Buddy Macon, because they told him, hell no. No way. A&T Recovery knows what they're doing. They've done plenty of these. You don't know what you're doing. They're not going to get insurance so you can go diving past OSHA limits, and you can.
Being passionate about the topic is why you're so successful at doing what you do, Taras.
Well, this guy, through Freedom of Information Act requests, we found out what an underhanded slime ball this guy was, and I don't know where he is now. But this guy was calling the FBI, calling the Army Corps of Engineers, calling everybody under the sun, accusing us of crimes. Just a disgusting, vile piece of trash. typical of the underwater archaeological branch of Naval History and Heritage Command, who, by the way, is, I'll repeat, they are leading the effort to locate these aircraft and preserve them. They are leading the effort. They put that out. Them and NOAA put that out a few days ago.
Yeah.
That they are leading the way. You know that they're leading the way.
Let's just think about that for a minute, Taras. Everybody that matters in the warbird community knows who you are. Everybody knows what you've done for America and what kind of stuff that you've brought back for us to enjoy and learn about. And my 10-year-old son and I watched Midway last night. I joke you not. My father, my son, and we sat there and watched Midway. And for a 10-year-old to ask questions on the war, it's just incredible.
It's a good thing.
It's a great thing. I think it's incredible. It just chokes me up talking about it. And I'm staring at serial number 2106, a picture in your book on page 68 in the Naval Aviation Museum, the National Museum of Naval in Pensacola.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that incredible? You look at that. You're reading my mind, Pete, because that's what I wanted to, remark to Taras is.
Oh, please do, Ed. You spent more time in Pensacola than I have, buddy.
Well, no, seeing knowing what this aircraft saw, the history.
That scumbag archaeologist at Naval History and Heritage Command was going to deny the recovery if he couldn't go scuba diving on it.
Oh.
Yeah, and
that shows the mentality of these scumbags, right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. They would keep stuff from the American public, if they can't go play.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I got to tell you a little more to the whole Midway. When we were putting the aircraft into Midway Airport, I brought in the largest reunion ever of Midway pilots for the event.
Yeah.
And I did it. Southwest Airlines. I brought in I think a dozen of them. Southwest Airlines and their spouses. Right. They all seem to have spouses still. It's interesting. And Southwest Airlines gave me a few tickets to fly a few of them in, and I had a big party, and we did several other things. We did living history. We interviewed them. We interviewed Dusty Cleese. If any of you know the Battle of Midway, Dusty Cleese was very famous.
Yeah.
Okay. Very important to the Battle of Midway. A whole bunch of Dusty Cleese. Along with a lot of pilots that weren't at Midway, like we did living history and did like a little documentary on Grant Young. I don't know if any of you know who that is. Grant Young tanked the model battleship. He crashed December 17th, 1943 in a TBF out on Lake Michigan. I took him back to his aircraft. I showed it to him.
Wow.
So
That's phenomenal.
These guys are my friends. So we did all this living history interviews. And do you know the great Naval History and Heritage Command people never, ever thought of doing such stuff.
Right.
When I told the director of Naval History and Heritage Command that I had living history interview of Commander Best at Midway, who was at Midway, of Dusty Cleese and all these other people, his teeth came out of his mouth.
You knew Best? You knew Commander Best?
Oh, when I called him, he said, Taras, you better get a crew here quickly because I'm not going to be around for much more than 2 weeks.
Oh, my gosh.
And we got a crew there. They interviewed him, and he was absolutely correct.
Two Japanese carriers in one day, right?
Yep. Commander Best. Yep. And so, and then I was good friends with Jig Dog Ramage, who wasn't at Midway, I don't think, but very famous SPD pilot, Jig Dog Ramage. Doug Rollo spent 2 weeks hanging with me at my house in Chicago. He almost got us arrested every day. He liked this waitress at Gibson's Steakhouse. So he said, every day we're going to lunch at Gibson's. He said, I'm going to get her to give me a kiss.
Ed,
gold.
That's solid gold right there.
Hey, Taras, Ed and I had the fortunate experience of interviewing one of the screenwriters on Band of Brothers. And Ed, you remember the interview, right? When he said he was hanging out with the 501st or the what?
Oh yeah, John Orloff. Yeah.
He said he was hanging out with these guys. They would have a reunion for a week, and by day 3, he couldn't keep up with them. Every night they were throwing down like they were back in the day. So
Yeah.
Doug Rollo and his wife. It was unbelievable. It was.
That's great.
Yeah, and I took him to go flying with Charles Downey. Do you guys know who Charles Downey is?
No,
I don't.
Okay, here's a question for your listeners. Who's the youngest known aviator in naval aviation history?
Well, now we know.
Now you know, Charles Downey. Charles Downey had a 19 whatever Stinson. And so Doug Rollo and I went out there, and these two 80 whatever 90 whatever guys took off in that Stinson.
Are you kidding me?
And
Wow.
if they would have crashed that day, they would have been happy as pigs and shit.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And so these and this is the thing that I think this has been what's been part of our success. Is the dimwits at the Naval History and Heritage Command don't understand the American experience.
Right.
They're not really not brothers in arms like we are.
No,
They don't understand that camaraderie.
Yeah. They don't. I don't think so.
They don't.
From what it sounds like.
Their present director is a former intelligence officer and an admiral. But when you talk about the archaeologists and all that, they think human beings are just cogs in a wheel. But
Right.
we're not. We're living, breathing, self-aware creatures that have compassion for each other and understand each other and know how to work with each other.
Yeah. To bring this full circle, I'm so glad that Tara started talking about the living history and the human element behind this, and talking about Danny Iverson, the guy that flew, Midway Madness, and Pete talked about getting goosebumps looking at it down at the Naval Aviation Museum. Well, in the book, a couple of pages above the picture of that restored aircraft, you can see the pictures of the thing coming out of the water, and this aircraft, because of that human connection, was meant to be found and meant to be recovered. You can still see the 30 cal machine gun intact in the aft cockpit.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
incredible.
those 50 calibers and that 30 cal shot Japanese aircraft.
Yeah, it's just remarkable.
Yeah. So when you're at the museum, in Pensacola, most of the airplanes, if you're not an enthusiast, you're just looking at a World War II airplane, and there is a story behind. Every time I go to a museum, I wonder about the story behind the airplane. Like, what was significant with the people that flew this aircraft?
Well,
Right.
I think you guys saw that what we do is involve the families of the pilots, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And let me tell you a little thing. The last chapter of the book talks a very, very sad story, right? We make the best of the sad story, and to be simple but not to give anything away, it's about a pilot missing, right?
Yeah.
And his family becomes involved. You know that I requested and Navy OpNav instruction demand that if a family requests a memorial service or a funeral for a missing veteran, that the Navy is to have that ceremony. Well, you have to read the last chapter of the book, and we requested a memorial ceremony for that pilot, and Naval History and Heritage Command did everything they could to thwart that. Their legal counsel kept shirking it. The memorial never happened because Naval History and Heritage Command's legal counsel thwarted it every way they could. And that just shows me how disgusting and vile and rampant their sickness runs in their organization. They couldn't lift a finger to honor somebody who gave his life for us.
Right. Well,
I didn't put that in the book because that's part of book 2.
Are you writing a second piece to this book, Taras?
It's writing itself. As the book writes itself. Naval History and Heritage Command, they approached us back in March and asked us for the positions of the remaining aircraft, right?
Yeah.
We told them through an exchange we would do way better than just give them the positions. We'd give them beautiful side scan images. We'd give them beautiful videotapes. We'd do all this kind of stuff. They came back to us with a set of requirements that were absolutely, completely insane. One of their requirements, you're going to love this. These are the experts in our Navy. One of their requirements were that we search south of a longitude.
Huh.
But you already have the positions.
Yeah. Okay. Think of what I just said. They wanted us to survey south of a longitude.
I get it.
I'm not kidding. This was their requirement.
Wow.
Right? And so you guys want to fill your listeners into what I just said?
Go ahead. I want to know. Go ahead.
Longitudes run from the South Pole to the North Pole.
Right.
You can't search south of a longitude. You can only search
latitude.
east or west of a longitude. Yeah, you can search south of a latitude, but they demanded we search south of a longitude. And it's how idiotic these people are.
Right.
And they're employed by, one of the things our archaeologists, our official PhD archaeologist says, is these people sit in their little cubicles and they believe that they have what would be the term, a moral high ground over us. And what they claim is we are capitalizing or making money on what we do.
Now, I would like to fill them full, take them all, put them in a bus, right? Taras, and I would like to take them just for a weekend down to Pungo, Virginia, right, Ed? And and show them a living World War II history museum in action.
Oh yeah.
At Yeagan's facility down there at the Military Aviation Museum.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
because that guy is not in the business of making money off of that facility. You just ask him.
And neither is A&T Recovery. We all lose money doing this. The only people making money off of this are the archaeologists and the bovine excrement employees of the Naval History and Heritage Command. Those are the only people making money off of this stuff.
Yeah.
The bureaucrats suck off the fatted cow of the American taxpayer, and they spend decades sucking off that cow, and they give us back nothing. There isn't a person out there that can tell you that anything that these people have ever given back to the American population. Nothing. All they've ever done is try to thwart our operations, try to thwart people like Jerry Yeagan, try to thwart everybody who does this, has a passion for doing it. So anyway,
wow.
I'll get off my high horse.
All right. Well, that's fair. That's fair. So Taras, as we wrap up, we're gonna have you back again, right, Ed?
Absolutely, it's a must.
It's a must. We won't wait too long either, Taras, because I think we would love to talk to you more about specifics of aircraft that you've pulled out, and maybe just focus on some of those specific aircraft.
And if you like, we can bring in some of the other important players in the book. I would love for the Naval History and Heritage Command people to do a podcast with you and defend their behavior all these years.
I don't. We'll see. We'll have to talk about that.
They can't. They won't do it.
We are neither a for-profit or non-for-profit organization. The Hanger Deck Podcast. We are here for your entertainment and enjoyment only.
Yeah. The Naval History and Heritage Command lawyers will say, "No way, we're doing that."
Yeah,
because they can't defend their positions. They just can't.
Right.
So.
No, but I think talking about some of the airplanes and where they've gone. If you're curious, if you're listening and you're curious about all of the serial numbers that Taras and his team have pulled out, You can go on search the internet. Is there any other place that outside of your book that you have a list of your serial numbers that you've recovered?
Wikipedia has a good. If you just put, you can put my name or A&T Recovery, and Wikipedia has a pretty good listing.
Yeah, I have the Wikipedia link up, and it's pretty amazing. You've got there are 40 airplanes that are listed on there, where they're located at in the world.
They did a pretty good job with that.
There's some nice pictures on there.
Hey, Taras, I got a quick question. I forgot to ask this earlier. One of your recoveries is at O'Hare, and as I told you, I go through O'Hare quite a bit. Is it the F4 that's there and has the Butch O'Hare story?
Yeah, it's a F4 F-3 rigid wing, original Wildcat.
Okay.
So this will be a teaser for the next thing. That was funded by the former CEO, I think chairman of the board of McDonald's and McDonald's Corporation.
Nice.
Why is the question, right?
Yep, there you go, Pete. There's a story for the next podcast.
And they also were a major funder for the SBD at Midway Airport. And Mr. Fred Turner, the McDonald's CEO, was the primary funder for the SBD-2P, which is photo reconnaissance version. Very rare. That bureau number is 2173. That is being under restoration at the Kalamazoo Aviation History Museum, also known as the Air Zoo. Yep, and that will go to the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum. So the question is, why on earth Mr. Fred Turner and McDonald's? That's the question.
All right.
Awesome.
Hey, go ahead and leave a comment on why do you think it is underneath our podcast on www.thehangardeck.com in the comments section. And, of course, I think the next round, Taras, can we count on you maybe doing a live Skype interview on our Facebook or YouTube live feed?
Hell yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Everybody wants to see my wonderful smiling face. Tom Cruise has to be worried. Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise are nervous.
Yeah, he is.
I'll take their movie slots.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, here's an aviation note. I just saw the Super Hornet that was in the Tom Cruise sequel, Top Gun 2, is now identified for the new Blue Angel Super Hornet team. So they're moving them into Super Hornets, Ed, and that airplane that was in the movie will now be part of the Blue Angels.
Awesome. Did not know that.
So that's pretty neat
stuff.
Cool. Hey, Taras, we've got upcoming here, Warbirds Over the Beach. I don't know if you follow the Yagan team down there, but I spoke to TK at the Fighter Factory earlier today, and they're looking forward for the Hangar Deck guys to come on down and visit with them again this year. Any intent getting you out of your comfort zone down there with the Fighter Factory and the Military Museum this year at Warbirds Over the Beach?
What's the date?
May 25th timeframe.
Well, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to let your listeners in on a clue. By that time period, Jerry Yagan should have an SBD that I recovered from Lake Michigan. Yeah, by then he should have that. I would imagine that he'll have that on full display.
Oh wow!
It's it's as it was out of the lake. It's got to be restored, but the exchange for that should be executed by then, and he should have it by then. So yeah, I would like to attend.
Yeah, there was a Dauntless there from the Commemorative Air Force a few years ago. They got their Dauntless flying around in the circuit. That's a beautiful airplane. It's just a beautiful airplane in person. So.
And then when you're down there, you got to play on Jerry Yagan's Enigma machines.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We've done that. Yeah.
Yep, he's got two of them.
He's got some great toys, doesn't he?
Yep. Yeah, we'll save that story for. Go ahead. Yeah. Taras has got a story about this.
The only person I know with some Enigma machines that let you play on them. So anyway.
Nice. But
not that anybody was listening on the other end, but So.
Well, so let's wrap this one up, guys. February 16th, 2020. I'll go over to my friend out there in Virginia, good friend Ed. What kind of closing thoughts do you have for Taras today?
I just want to thank Taras wholeheartedly for a great conversation. Look forward to future stories on the Hangar Deck podcast.
Nice.
All right. Thanks, you guys. Thanks.
Well, hold on a minute. I'm not closing out yet. The Great Navy Birds of Lake Michigan. Where can we find this book? Where can our audience find this book? Anything you would like to promote at A&T Recovery from our Hangar Deck fans?
Well, what the book just tells the story, and it's sold at Amazon, Target, Barnes and Noble, everywhere. Just put in Google and take your pick of where you want to buy it from. Everybody's selling it. Not everybody, but on my understanding, a lot of small bookstores sell it. Barnes and Noble, Amazon. What we really would like to do, and this is the plug that I really want to get out there, is there will be 60, 70 aircraft left on the bottom of Lake Michigan that are being terribly destroyed by the guaga mussels. Naval History and Heritage Command has thwarted us for so many years. So many more aircraft could have been recovered. What we wish for is some people of means to become involved, and what we'd like to do is get out there and take a look at all of them and do what we can to present the rest that remain to the American public. We know Naval History and Heritage Command are a bunch of incompetent nitwits, and they'll never do it. So we'd like to do Facebook series or whatever on the remaining aircraft. So anyway, so anybody can contact me anytime. Put my contact information on your website, your podcast, whatever you want.
Absolutely.
So
thank you very much, Taras, for coming on tonight. We'll definitely have you back, and we'll keep promoting this effort. Okay.
All right. Thank you. So.
All right. Hangar Deck podcast out.